Welcome to the EIR Academy. It is September, and we're going to today talk about leadership. Reading through Eddie Wilson's book, The Titans of Leadership, right? The 8 principles of leadership. One of the things he said after being a part of 115 companies, selling 80 of them, and just building, one of the things that he said he needed to focus on to do this was the core component of leadership, right? So we're going to talk about that as a whole, and you can ask whatever question you want with it, and I'll be the moderator of it. But the format is he's going to share a story, he's going to share some of the things that he's learned, maybe some of the screw ups that he's made along the way. So maybe that you don't have to do that. The purpose and mission of the EIR Academy is shared wisdom, right? Learn from my screw ups, learn from my mistakes. I've been in all sorts of business arrangements and I've failed miserably doing it. So instead of you guys repeating that process, maybe just learn from me, and then I could share that and some of the successes that I have as well. So I want to give a special thanks to the Ocala CDP for investing in this. When I was talking to Kevin, Shirley, and Tyler, they were saying, what does Ocala need? I said, I think we need a place, a little small, intimate community where, after the presentations go, we kind of peel back the thing and say, look at my business. What do I need? What kind of help do I need? What kind of connections do I need? So we formed the EIR Academy to be that, to be a little, almost like an intimate mastermind to build and grow together. I bring in my friends from out of state, out of county, to come here and to share, to inspire, and to show where we could go as a group. So the Ocala CP helped fund this. And then for Chris. So Chris has been a resident here and been a part of the EIR Academy from the inception. But I want to introduce you guys to Chris. Chris, tell us a little bit about Ari and OTEC.
Ari is a start-to-finish real estate investment platform. We help starting and scaling real estate investors get access to capital cheaper and faster. And then OTEC is shifting a little bit. It is Central Florida's startup tech startup group. We're here to support startups in the tech space and innovation space. Things like figure out how to be a company and where do they go for capital raising. So that.
Cool. Thank you. All right. So what we'll do, and could you take this off, turn the screen off for a second, because we'll be bringing up Eddie in just about 2 minutes. I want to know from you guys, right? Who here has ever sold a business? Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3. So we've had a few people. Eddie, you sold a few, right? 80. So we sold the business. How many people here has made their first hire? Has hired one person? Okay, who here has hired or maybe managed more than 10 people? 100? 1,000? Right. So what we're going to talk about in this too is you need people, and to build people, like Marcus Lemonis says, people, product, profit, or no, people, product, process, right? To get to profit is needed. One of the key components with people is leadership. And I tell you, that's one of the biggest weaknesses that I have is leadership, and I'm investing a ton of time in learning how to be a leader. So I figured, why not bring a friend in who's really good at it and who has, over 4,000 people that would say he's good at it, to come on up and share his story. So Eddie, come on up. Can we get him a microphone, please? Everybody, round of applause for Eddie. So, Eddie, thanks for coming. Eddie, let's start with this. When someone meets you in a coffee shop or something for the first time, and they go, "What do you do?" How do you typically tell people what you do?
So really, that's like the hardest question I think all of us have to answer, right? It's like, because many of us have so many passions and you're trying to explain who you are based on your passions and your actions. But I really boil it down to 3 areas. Number one, I'm a corporate leader, so I do still manage, own, and operate my own businesses. We have 17 right now. And I'm always operating businesses, and some of those, in my corporate office, we have about 83 employees, and we have employees all over at the different companies we own. Thank you. And so I am a corporate leader, and I think that's what my people would say. Then second of all, I'm an investor, and I am constantly looking at opportunities. I'm a third generation real estate investor. Grandfather was a real estate investor. Dad was a real estate investor. I've taken that to a little bit different level, both in real estate, but then also in private equity, learning how to buy businesses, sell businesses. And then lastly, altruist. And so at some point you get to a place in your life where you have enough money and you take care of your generation, your next generation, your grandchildren, and you realize that life is not about the things you have, and that you better do something that's more meaningful. And so then I've gotten to a place of impact. And so I run a very large nonprofit organization. We're in 108 countries, and we give pretty much all the money away we make. And so I just gotten to a place where we want to make impact on the world. And so I always say corporate leader, investor, altruist.
Yeah. Getting your start, becoming a corporate leader, but your start, you were in the music scene for a little bit. You were in radio and TV shows, right? Kind of give us your journey of that. And then as you guys are listening, I want you to think about your own personal business, your own personal vision, your dreams, your desires, and whatever questions you would like to ask a very successful person who's been a part of it. So as you guys have questions, raise your hand, and what I'll do is I'll just write it down, and then when there's like a pause, what we'll do is we'll come back, because I want this to be engaging between you and Eddie, because this is an opportunity for us to all learn together. Okay, so if you do have questions, just raise your hand and I'll come back to you, I promise. All right, Eddie, so tell us your story.
Sure. So I'll make it pretty simple. I started off in television and radio. I graduated from and I hope this doesn't offend anybody, but the Ohio State University. And I just like to irritate people because it and OH. Okay, thank you. And but anyway, so and I appreciate your contribution of Urban Myers to our championship team. I appreciate you giving us a shot. Yeah. But anyway, so I went to broadcast school and spent pretty much my first days in television and radio. And growing up in a home of an entrepreneur, my father had lots of wins and losses. And one of the greatest benefits that I've ever had in living in his home was he never wanted to take anything from my grandfather. So my grandfather was successful, and my dad said, I want to make it on my own. So I remember Christmases with no Christmas presents. I remember, days with very little food. Like, that's how I grew up. And I look back on those days and I think, well, what's the worst that can happen in really liability, like creating liability? Like when I invest, I think, what's the worst that can happen? I go back and I have a great experience with my kids, and we have nothing. I mean, like, I don't look at those days of Christmas and say, man, I can't believe I didn't have any presents. My dad spent time with me. We had a great family dynamic. And my dad looks back at those days and thinks, like, that was the worst days of my life, And so where my dad is very, very risk adverse, I'm very, I'm very risk tolerant. And so as I went into broadcasting, I started looking at the world in a very different lens. My dad really removed a lot of the fear out of my life, that fear of loss, because I experienced it and it really wasn't that bad, And so as I began to look at that, I began to think, how can I exponentially increase what I'm doing? And began to look at the world for the opportunities that were around me, and wondering, if I took this risk when no one else will, what would it yield me? And September 11th, 2001, which we obviously just went through just a couple of days ago. I remember when the World Trade Centers fell. I was managing a television station in Atlanta, Georgia, and a man that we had just hired by the name of Sean Hannity, if you know him, was on our station, and he was on the radio station, never done TV before. And we were in the same building as the Center for Disease Control, and the National Guard surrounded our building that morning. And we had decided, I was the general manager, I was 24 years old, we were selling the station, so the GM quit, and Dave Kennedy from DC came in and he said, you're kind of the only guy that, I was 24, is like, you want to run the station, you won't have a job, he said, probably in 4 months once the sale goes through, but at least you can put this on your resume. And I was like, okay, sounds good, And Sean was sitting in there that morning with a lady by the name of Trudy, a good Southern, name, Atlanta. And the Center for Disease Control was in our building, and we literally were surrounded by the National Guard, and all of our on-air staff couldn't get in. Well, we got a call from the FCC saying, hey, Atlanta is going to become the hub for the entire Southeast. We're going to shut down all feeds. You're going to go live. Our ABC affiliate that we ran, they're like, the whole South is going to watch you read the teleprompter. Do not vary from it. If you vary from it, we will shut you down. We'll go to Orlando or somewhere else. And I ran into the newsroom. I said, who's got makeup on? Who's ready to read a teleprompter? And it was literally Sean getting ready to do a test and Trudy. And Sean was the only on-air person we had for that day. Sean Hannity got introduced to the world on September 11th when it comes to television. And so my program director, so anyways, for 24 hours straight, we couldn't get anybody in the building. Sean, they just read teleprompters. We ate ramen noodles in the building. It was just this crazy experience. And Sean got introduced to the world that day. And 2 weeks later, I went to Dave Kennedy, my boss, and I said, hey, I think we should build a television show and with Sean. And he was like, no, he's too crass. Dave hated Sean, and which is always a funny dynamic. But anyways, he said he's too crass. Nobody will like him. He's arrogant, you know. And I said, I think it'll go well on TV. And so Leslie Fram, she actually put together the first show, and we launched it. And Dave Kennedy called back. He's like, I'm not giving any more airtime to this. And so Leslie said to me and two other people, she said, what if we bought airtime off of our own station and built this program? And I remember thinking like that, you know, that liability, like, you know, Dave, who is, you know, the Kennedy family, like they know broadcast more than anybody. And we're going to take this risk that he's not willing to take. And I didn't have a lot of capital, but we bought our own airtime. And Leslie produced what's called the Hannity and Combs program, if you remember that program, which became the #1 show in America for about 9 years running. Well, we ran it out of Atlanta. Fox called and said, we'd like to buy your program. I'd never bought a business before. I'd never sold a business before. I looked at everything like a real estate transaction because I was a real estate guy. And so we sold our first, you know, business and got taken advantage of. Like in a level that I had never experienced before, you know, and it was horrible. And so we sold that program, and it was, you know, the rest was history on that. They made about a million times the dollars that we made off the sale. But I had some capital to go work with, and I started an ad agency. And the ad agency, we signed Subway to be, we were HC record for buying for Subway. And this is during the $5 footlong years, if you remember those. And I needed capital. I started trying to source capital. And we had a private group that wouldn't show who they were, but they were willing. So we were all the way at the signing table trying to take capital. And at the signing table, it gets delayed, and this group comes in, and I'm thinking I'm going to source 30 million to do all this buying and all this, you know, crazy stuff. And the guy walks in, he sits down at the table. He said, the reason we delayed the closing is because, he said, I'm the CEO of Starcom Worldwide. Well, Starcom Worldwide is the largest ad agency in the world. He said, I'm not going to give you the capital, but I'm going to buy your business today. And I said, what do you mean? And I was so shocked. I was like, no, we have terms on the loan, and you can't do it. He was like, no, here's the deal. He said, I'm going to take the loan away. I know you're overextended. You have no capital. He was like, Subway's expecting to make the buy next month. If you make that buy, you had to hold their buy for 90 days before you got paid back from Subway. I didn't have the capital to float that. He was like, you're going to capsize your agency. He was like, so it was basically like this crazy moment at 26 years old where I was like, okay, I'm being taken advantage of again. You know, like, now I made money. We sold it. I sold a $30 million agency for about 11 million. But I walked away that day with 11 million bucks in my pocket. Right. And so I tried to find the benefit in that. Then I decided after that day, this is never happening to me again. You know, like I'm gonna learn this process. I'm gonna learn to acquire businesses, but not with me winning in mind, with us winning in mind, and allow me to start building processes to buy, acquire, build businesses, but with the intent of potentially exiting and always having what I call the succession plan in mind. And so I've perfected that. And so 115 businesses later, I think we're on our 96th exit. In 2019, I had 86 companies all running concurrently. We had about 6,000 employees. And we sold 76 companies in 2019. My exits, and these are personal companies I owned, my exit was $1.27 billion in 2019. And you think, you know, due diligence on one company is crazy. 76 of them was insane. And big insurance company, mortgage companies, all kinds of different stuff we sold. And it's just because I learned the process of private equity. and learn this process of what does a bigger company want, and if I could serve it up to them, then I can architect this process properly. And so this year we've bought probably 7 companies so far. We've sold 3 in the last 10 months for 91.5 million. And I just perfected this process. There are businesses literally all over the place right now, ripe for acquisition, people that want to get out, baby boomers that don't have somebody to pass their business on to, right? They're literally just going to shut the door one day, that they're looking for an opportunity, and so these businesses are everywhere. And we can do this in a way that serves everyone, right? Like where they get a retirement, where I get an opportunity to increase and create more value and potentially sell it or hold it. And so that's the story.
So super cool. We do have some questions that pop up, but I grew up on a construction site swinging hammers, right? Like we worked for the deal that week. And, when I first started getting exposed to people who thought much bigger and who experienced, what it did is it started to expand my mind. It's like, maybe I don't have to just swing hammers. Maybe we can invest in doing this at a scale. So I appreciate you sharing that transparently, because a lot of times people don't talk about their money. And what it does is that it doesn't allow us an opportunity to think bigger. So I want to really applaud you of being willing to talk about your successes, your failures, and even some of the mistakes you made early on. Let's do this before Chris, we dive in. You and I, we get to go back in time to the 24-year-old guy or 26-year-old guy, both times where you sold a business, but you were maybe taken advantage of, or you didn't milk it for what it's fully worth. What's one thing you would have done differently in each of those scenarios? Because maybe that gives us some insight as to how you think differently now.
Yeah, in every business, there's really 5 phases. The 5 phases of business, real quick, are startup, then perseverance. Perseverance, really that pre-profit phase where you're going in and out of profit. You don't really have the right people in the right seats. You've got multiple hats on. Viability is number 3. You got a little bit of capital. You're making success. You've got cash flow. You got the right people in the right seats. You're not working 100 hours a week anymore. Then you go into scale, right? What do I do? How do I hit the ceiling of what I'm capable of? And then lastly, phase number 5 is succession. What do I do when I hit the ceiling? The problem is that most people never deal with phase 5. I never had the thought, nobody ever said to me, when you're building this business, what are you going to do when you hit your ceiling, or when you get to the place where you don't want it anymore, or when it doesn't work anymore, or when you lose passion for it, or whatever it is? Nobody ever had that conversation with me. And I would go back and I'd have that conversation with my 24-year-old self of like, when you're building this, what's the plan? Like what is the exit? Like, because what we think of is we think of the success. We think like, well, when I get it here, right, I'm going to make this much money. When I get it here, I'm going to be able to take care of my family. When I get it here, I'm going to buy another location. It's like we have all these plans in the mid tier, and it's like we never really think about the end. The crazy part about it is if we actually start the succession planning, what am I going to do with my business when I hit the ceiling? Way back here at perseverance, before I'm actually making true profit month over month, I'm in this very viable place. If I start having succession planning conversations, then I actually build a better business along the way. And then it starts giving me greater opportunities along that path. There's 50 businesses I never intended to sell, but because I actually went through succession planning, it opened my eyes that, if I build it to here and think about this. I sold a business 2 months ago. My CFO, we have a whole underwriting team and everything. And my CFO, I wasn't going to sell it. I was in love with it. Does anybody fall in love with your businesses? Like, I love them. It's like, they're like children, it's like, I love the people. I love the business. I have a coffee company right now. We have multiple locations. We source coffee from 9 coffee regions. I'm in love with it, And but the problem is I get attached to the identity that's in it. And my CFO said, there's an offer on the table for this business. And I said, well, I would never sell that business. He said, really? You'd never sell that business? And I said, no. And he goes, well, this is the offer. He said, literally, they're giving you a 10x multiple on your EBITDA, right? So let's say they're giving me 10 times value on my net profit, right? And he said, so what you're saying is you're actually willing to work the next 10 years doing the exact same thing, making the same profit to get what you could have tomorrow if you just sign on the dotted line. I was like, yeah, I'd rather have the 10 years of my life back. And he was like, so I just want to make sure, it's Dave. And I said, yeah, you're right. I said, let's sell it. And let me negotiate a little bit harder. And we went out, we got 11 and a half times multiple. We walk out of there and I don't have to do 11 and a half years worth of work to get the same result. I just bought back 11 years of my life.
So cool. Chris Marshall. All right. So the format on questions, I'm going to let you hold the microphone. Your question should be about like 30 seconds to Eddie, right? You get one question. So 30 seconds to Eddie because there's a lot of people with questions. And then let's see how this goes. Go for it, Chris.
So I haven't bought anywhere near as much. Bought a couple. Can you explain the 10x earnings and actually where that is in relation to how good of a deal that is? Because I know from experience 10x on a non-tech company is insane. Can you explain?
Yeah.
Good question, Chris.
There's valuations are this like crazy thing, right? Like, how do I know if my business is valuable and what it's worth? And I can tell you right now, it doesn't matter what business you have, somebody will buy your business. Like, that's the one misnomer that I've always thought, like, well, there's businesses I have that people won't buy. So the crazy part about it is tech usually gives me the greatest increase in multiple. Reoccurring revenue inside of tech is the holy grail, right? Because then they don't just value your business off of your net, they value it off of your top line. And you can even potentially get 25, 30 times. Kajabi, you guys know what Kajabi is? It's the platform for learning. The 400 billion, it's like these crazy numbers. And it's like, and so for me, I'm always architecting the exit. There's 3 things you get asked every time you sell a business. If you write anything down, I'd write this down, okay? 3 things. Number 1, they ask you what your top line versus bottom line. They're going to want to know what your net profit is, your EBITDA, right? That's the thing. You have to architect that before your sale. If I'm moving into a season of selling a business, I'm going to make sure that my inventories are low, my cost of production's low, my cost of goods are low. I'm going to make that EBITDA look as good as it possibly can for about a 12-month period, right? 18 months, even better. Next, they're going to ask you, what IP do you have? What do you do proprietarily that no one else does? And it doesn't have to be just technology. It could be the data you have. It could be the way you do things. If you watch Shark Tank, Kevin O'Leary, which we've had Kevin on so many of our stages a lot, and it's funny. Kevin will say at Shark Tank, he'll be like, why would I pay you $1 million for this percentage when I can just go spend 500,000 of my own dollars and do it myself, right? Like, that's what IP is. You can't just pull what you do off the shelf and do it for less, right? And so when you create IP, right, like your personal, proprietary way of doing things, maybe it's the data, the way you do things, the technology that supports it, you get higher value. And then thirdly, operating system. This is the one thing that most people miss. And so I actually created my own operating system, how you do business, right? So there's operating systems out there like EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, Gino Wickman. If you ever read the book Traction, there's Scaling Up, there's Six Sigma, there's 100 different operating systems. I created one called Empire. The reason I created Empire was because every time I had a question, they were asking me these 3 questions. And what they really want to know is, if I lose the top layer of leadership, do you operate a business in a fashion that I can put somebody else in that understands how the business runs, and we don't miss a beat and we still can go find the opportunity? What I never want to do is, in selling a business, get stuck in that business. There's a thing called golden handcuffs, where they pay you a lot of money to stay in the business for a year or 2. I want to make sure that I'm the most irrelevant person in this business when I sell it. I do that through an operating system. Those 3 ways are how I get the highest level of multiple. There's a bunch of other multiple kickers like recurring revenue, attrition. There's a million different ways to architect it, but I'm always pushing these businesses to get the highest multiple I possibly can.
Yeah, that's a great question. And as you guys are thinking through the questions that you have for Eddie, one of the things I want you to have in mind is ask questions about leadership, about people, right? Because we could talk about numbers and such like that too, but this guy wrote a book on leadership, and he leads not only at 1,400 employees, but also like tons of investors and celebrities around the world are looking to this guy for direction and such. So let's make sure that we capture that as well. All right, so state your name and your question to Eddie.
Hey, good morning. Steve Nelson. I'm a little bit curious what you said about stage 5 succession. You built a business over time. Now, you said that you can sell it short and make some money, okay? But what is it that the buyer is going to do to the business that you couldn't do you think?
Let me just qualify real quick. So, what is it that me as the business owner couldn't do that the buyer's going to do?
Yes.
Okay. So here's how this world works. I would say that there's like minnows, there's mid-sized fish, and there's whales. The minnows are the small business operators, and the small business operators are, you're running a business of $1 million or 500,000 or 2 or 3 million. Then there's these whales, these private equity firms, right? And they buy businesses at 100 million. They don't know they can't do what you do at this lower level. What's your business?
I am in technology.
Okay, technology. They rarely can do what the small business can. Where I come in oftentimes is I play that mid-level. And so oftentimes I do everything that the small business is unwilling to do. And typically shore that business up, go get it a larger footprint, scale the business, grow it, and then I sell it to the whale, right? So I think and I just want to make sure I understand what you're asking me, but what I can do when I buy this business that the owner can't do, is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay. What I can do is number one, I have resources. Oftentimes businesses are struggling because of 2 things. They struggle because of people, or they struggle because of capital. They don't struggle because of ideas or products. Like, they actually struggle just because they don't have enough capital. For instance, did you see, he asked me, we were watching the automotive girl up here, Anna. Yeah, I kept trying to say Crystal. Anna, and he said, when you're watching a business like this, what are you thinking? And I said, what I was thinking is I love her energy. And I would be down to invest in that all day long, because I always,
Anna, hope you're watching this.
I invest in the jockey, not the horse, right? And good Ocala, but and so I invest in the jockey, not the horse. And so I look at someone like her, and you know what she can't do is, if she said today, man, I really want 5, I have enough clients that I could service 5 locations. She probably doesn't have enough capital or wherewithal to go start 5 locations in the next 6 months. Somebody like me, I could give her 10 locations. I give her 100 locations. If she had a big enough business or idea or the ability to scale, I mean, we own a company called Everbowl. We have 66 locations. It's the acai bowl, more like I've had, so it's like, to me, it's I already have the systems and process in place that if she said, I want to take my one shop to 5 or 10, I have the capital that I could do it. I could buy the land. I could build her shop. I could do whatever she needs to do. And that's usually what most people at that level can't do. The second thing is, and this is what happens in startup and perseverance, what happens is, and we've all done it, this is me included, is because we're not profitable, we're still in the grind, we hire our cousin Betty to be our CFO, and we hire our brother to be our sales rep, and we hire all these people that maybe aren't qualified at the next level, but they're willing to put the time and effort in. And I can't afford it to pay some rock star person to come in and be my CFO. So I'm willing to take what I get. And the problem is then all of a sudden I grow into viability, and my business is viable, and I don't know how to handle the people issues I've created, right? And now all of a sudden I don't have a qualified CFO, and it's hindering me from my growth. I don't have a qualified salesperson, but it's my brother-in-law. I don't have, and it's like, and I find most businesses have people issues more than capital issues. What I'm willing to do is go in, not like a hatchet man and cut people and fire people. I literally bought a company called SEAL Team Leaders. The reason I bought that company is because Larry Yatch is the most decorated SEAL of all time, right? He led SEAL Team 3, most dangerous missions of all times. I literally bought that company to put Larry on my staff. And you know what Larry's job is? To get the leaders of the companies that I buy to break through every ceiling they have. It's what the lady talked about dealing with their subconscious. And so oftentimes when I'm buying a business, I actually intend to keep some of the leadership involved if they want to. I want them to take the ride with me. When I sell businesses, Like the businesses, the 91.5 million, I had a guy that had never thought or dreamed about selling a business in one of those. He walked away with 10 million bucks in his pocket. That his business, when I bought it, was doing $400,000 in top line, and we did that in 3 years. He never dreamed of it. So I'm happy to win together.
I always thought,
Just a little bit. Put your hand up here. Yeah, this is fucking antenna. And then,
I just want to add something to that if I could.
absolutely, and then tell me, go for it.
Okay, I always thought that the acquisition was to acquire intellectual property and not the people to eliminate competition.
So there's a lot of reasons to acquire. Intellectual property is one of them. There are companies, but like I just said, I bought SEAL Team Leaders. That's what we call an acqui-hire. I literally bought that business to acquire the talent in the business. I didn't care about their clients. I didn't care about the technology. Then there are businesses I acquire because of the product. I bought a company called FitCon. We serve communities that we buy with data. And we looked at that community. We pulled the 3 million people that are fitness enthusiasts that are on our database. And we said, what's missing in your community? We found out that nootropic supplements were a big, blue ocean opportunity for us. And we bought a nootropic supplement company to just introduce to those 3 million people. There's a lot of reasons why people acquire the businesses.
Tyler, question in the back?
Hello, thank you again, Eddie. Tyler with the CEP and the power plant. Talking about self-leadership. You mentioned breaking through ceilings. You mentioned, we all have our demons that we need to address, etc. What would you recommend as the top 3 books or top 2 programs? Those obviously included. Self-serving answers, okay. But what would you recommend for those entrepreneurs, those founders, who are struggling with breaking through? I've got a lot of people that were in this room previously for Million Cups that have created amazing jobs for themselves. They will never sell it to anybody.
Right.
They will never go past their own capabilities. And so how do we break that?
There's so many answers. That's such a deep question, but it's like, I love, one of the books that my dad gave me when I was a kid was Rich Dad Poor Dad. If you guys ever read that book, it's Robert Kiyosaki. He has this whole concept of the 4 quadrants, getting out of creating a job for yourself and getting to a place of being an investor. Concepts like that are so rare in today's world and society. And so I always think that we have to, and so my first book, number 1, would be Rich Dad Poor Dad. I think it's revolutionary. And I know that there's lots of people that don't like Robert, and he's, a crazy guy, and he's a contrarian, he says crazy things. That book is gold. Like the concept, whether you like him or not, the concepts in that book are gold. The second thing is I am a firm believer in the concept that Malcolm Gladwell speaks about in his Tipping Point book, where he says, in order to be an expert, you got to put in 10,000 hours. There's a missing component in culture today, and that is people that are just willing to roll up their sleeves and go get to work, right? Like, I read that book in my late 20s when it first came out, and I didn't say, oh crap, it takes 10 or 7 years worth of 40 hours a week to get to my 10,000 hours. And so it's going to take me everything I start or try. It's going to take me 7 years worth of hard work to get there. What I said is, how do I shortcut that time? How do I get to 10,000 hours faster? There's a reason why I'm 44 years old and I've gotten to the place I am. And it's because of that concept. I don't really watch a lot of Netflix at nighttime. I maximize my time. I had a dad that said this to me all the time, over and over and over again. If time is your most valuable asset, why do you spend so much time looking at your bank account instead of your schedule? Why don't you manage your time more than you manage your money? I heard that so much in my life. And that's what I've done. I've looked at those 10,000 hours and I said, how do I make it 8,000 hours? How do I get to that faster? How do I get that in 2 years or 3 years? And it's what I preach at these. Norman works for our sales team, and great young guy. We got a great young staff over there in Ponte Vedra. I asked him to drive me over here yesterday, and I preached that to you on the way here, didn't I? Right? I was like, look, here's the deal. You just got to suck it up. You got to put your time in, right? And that doesn't mean that you can't shortcut that. That doesn't mean that you sitting in this car with me can't cut 1,000 hours off, right? Being in a room like this, you just slash some time off of that learning curve, right? And then lastly, number 3, third book would be this. I really, and this is where the self-serving answer come in. I wrote a book called The Titan Doctrine. It's the 8 principles of leadership, Titan leadership. After running I had at the peak of my business, I had 86 companies. I wasn't running those 86 companies. I had 86 CEOs running those companies. And what I realized is to the degree that I could grow those 86 people, men, women, amazing people, I could get the exponential value of those 86 companies. We scaled 41 of those companies, true scale. And that's how I got to the $1 billion exit that year. And what I realized is I'm systematic, or like my brain is more systematic than it is creative. And so I looked and I realized there are really 7 or 8 problems that all of them are dealing with. And then I began, and I'm a historian, I love history. And I began to look at history and say, what characters in history figured out these problems? And then literally, how did they exemplify the change in their life that they could overcome? And I wrote a history book on, hey, look, you want to see somebody who is willing to change? Let's talk about George Washington. The guy came to America with a red coat on. He ended up becoming the father of our nation, you know, with a blue coat on, fighting thousands of people that he trained, right? I mean, you think about like this ability to change and why he changed and how he changed. And I dissect those pieces down because what I had to get good at was getting those 86 CEOs to break through those problems that they all had in common. And so I basically took that book, and so that's called the Titan Doctrine. And so those would be the 3 books.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Let me add a fourth thing that we mentioned just last night. The show Billions, right?
Yeah.
Great show. There's a person in that show named Wendy. And in terms of leadership, Wendy's role in this, you know, Axe Capital hires Wendy, internal health psychologist, to help people break through their ceiling. So we were talking about the strategies. He acquired Navy SEALs to come in and help people break through their own personal self-leadership to be this and to grow and scale these companies. And then we'll go to your question because it's your birthday. But like Wendy, she had to help leaders break through their ceiling. You hired a SEAL to help your leaders break through.
And me personally. Yeah.
So 2 questions. Sorry, I'll only do 1. What leadership ceilings did you personally have that you had to break through after all this stuff? What was the hardest one that you had to break through personally?
Yeah, and I'm still breaking through it, right? Because just like the lady previously talked about, we really have 2 big limitations in life. And one of the greatest limitations in our life is our subconscious, because our subconscious makes whatever it is, 40,000 decisions a minute. Your conscious brain makes 7. So who's really in control of the actions you take? Typically your subconscious brain. Your subconscious brain exists to keep you safe. So you have a trauma in your life, it sets a ceiling or a limitation. And all of a sudden that limitation is there to try to keep you safe, healthy, you know, alive. And so all of a sudden now all these decisions that you just make naturally, you don't even think about them, right? Like which direction to go to work, you know, what clothes to put on. There's so many decisions you make subconsciously, and your subconscious is there to keep you safe. And all of a sudden you've let all this trauma seed in. And so it doesn't matter. It's something your dad said when you were a kid. It's some, you know, failure at a Little League baseball play. It doesn't matter what it is. These little tiny seeds that grow into these massive trees that create ceilings, you have to learn to break through them. And I have Larry Gatch is his name, do intensives. And we put 4 leaders in a room, and he literally starts mapping our subconscious pieces out. And we've created this way that we force it through, and it doesn't matter if you're male, female. We all have it. We all have some trauma. Like, and in my life, I thought it was all the big traumas in my life. My sister passed away. My brother passed away. I'm thinking like those are the big limitations of my life, and it had nothing to do with those things. You begin to see like these limitations. Well, when the insurance company, I told you about this one last night at dinner. The insurance company, I had an offer for one of my insurance companies for roughly $800 million. And Lloyd's of London came in and said, we'll give you $1.3 billion. What I saw was Starcom Worldwide sitting there as a 26-year-old guy taking advantage of me. I thought, this is the largest insurance company in the world. This is the grandfather of all insurance companies. If I'm ever going to get taken advantage of, it's going to be right here. This is the big bad wolf, and I'm staring at it in the face. I'm out. You know, like I literally And I took the $800 million sale, and I had partners in the deal. I wanted them to win with me, and I was so scared to make the wrong choice. And it was that self-limiting belief that I hadn't learned enough. Understand, I had already exited over 50 companies before that, right? And I'm sitting there, and I leave $400 million on the table. 400 million. Like, think about that. Like, that's like in the concept of billions, you're like, yeah, well, you got it close to a billion. It's like 800 million. It's like, yeah, but when you start thinking about that, I didn't have my tax strategy in place. I paid, in that one alone, I paid almost $300 million in taxes. I mean, Uncle Sam wants his piece. There should be a bridge named after me somewhere in this world, but it's like, but it's like I paid that, and but I left 400 million on the table because of these self-limiting beliefs, because of this trauma that I experienced. I thought, I'm gonna get screwed. I'll take the person that seems like they're less, way safer. Like, and so I took it, and even last night I was lamenting over it, right? Like, I'm still sitting there. It's like I'm still breaking through those things, because we all have these self-limiting beliefs. And so first of all, it's our traumas, and then second of all, it's really just our upbringing, the culture that we've lived in, right? Not necessarily trauma based. Something bad didn't happen. It's just the culture you lived in, right? And so my dad, because he refused any capital from my grandparents, built his own empire, and he's really successful now, has 3 businesses and really well. My mom has her own companies, and but that concept of like we never have enough, like, seeded into who I was. I don't know if it was a trauma, but it was just like the culture I grew up in, right? Like, save everything, make sure, so it's like those weird little things. It's like that's what really limits us in our life.
Sure. Sure.
Hey.
And your question.
Yes, sir. My name is Judith. I run a company called Fee Slasher, and literally listening to you, I'm like, the thing we've been building, the more we've been bringing on pieces, is targeting people like you. And listening to you talk is absolutely inspiring. But my real question is, what is it when you are looking at a business and you're seeing the things that are, that EBITDA is not where it needs to be and all this stuff, that you're prepping it for that? What would be the pieces that would be the most valuable? Because that is literally the part that I work on. And I'm trying to figure out how to best serve somebody who's in that position.
Yeah. I always look at the people first. We use a company called Predictive Index. I don't know if you're familiar with Predictive Index. I predictive index the entire company. And we put into quadrants these people's drives. Predictive Index isn't something. What Predictive Index does is it basically takes, I don't want to go super deep into it, but it basically takes people's drives and aspirations and maps it, versus looking at, because what I know is I can actually modify behavior if somebody's driven towards an end state, right? Myers-Briggs, Colby, all those, they really are talking about their personalities. Well, I've seen people under duress change their personality all day long, right? Like, they'll go work hard if they actually need to produce. The people side, and understand the people side, is the most valuable thing, right? Second of all, processes. Like, people that have process, like, for instance, like if I were to go look at Anna's business, the first thing I would do is I would predictive index every single person in that business. And it's very, very invasive, right? Like, you're like, oh, by the way, we want to run a predictive index test. A lot of these companies don't even know they're potentially being sold. So you have to do it very carefully, right? Like, we want to run a predictive index, and I'll actually send in someone to teach predictive index in their business, actually give them value for us to understand who the people are. The second thing I do is I'm always looking at their processes. I'm a firm believer in replicatable processes creating efficiency. If I could walk in Anna's business and I see that they do an oil change the same way, they onboard their customers the same way, that they have a process for how they do things, then I know I'm actually closer to the potential yield than not, right? And so those are the two things. We're looking at people and processes, right? Like, because I would never buy a bad product or a bad service business. So, like, you talk about Marcus Lemonis, it's like, if you have horrible Google reviews because you got a bad product or service, like, I'm out, right? Like, and so first of all, if you can clean that up, that'd be helpful too. But it's like, I'm out because I don't want to deal with all this bad baggage, right? Like, I'm fine with people issues and capital issues and standard business fare. But if you took advantage of people don't like what you do, they don't like your product or service, like, I'm typically out.
Well, sorry. Yeah, no worries. Solar trainer Paul, up in front. Good question. Thank you.
Okay, so
Hold on, wait for the mic, so the people.
Oh, sorry.
And then Paul.
So when you come in and you're looking at a business, or now you're taking over the business and you're coming in, obviously you've got a tremendous amount of leadership experience. So can you share with us some of the things that you do from the leadership standpoint, or things that you teach the leaders of these companies, or adjustments that they need to make to help make them and the business even more successful?
90 to 95% of the time, the reason the business isn't the success it should be is the actual leader, him or herself. Most people will follow when led. There's three people in your business. There's leaders, there's managers, and there's followers. Leaders inspire action to happen. Managers look at all the resources and actually create the action that happens, and the followers do it, right? And so, but in the end, a true leader can play leader, manager, and follower. Oftentimes, what I find in businesses as people lead, they're just missing small components, and most oftentimes it's one of two things. Number one, ego. I've gotten to a place where I don't need to do that anymore. I've got people that'll do that for me. They won't relegate themselves to small tasks. I still walk through the office every day and pick up trash on the floor. I still because in my mind, if I ever get to a place of ego, it becomes a great ceiling for me. It's number two. So ego is one, right? And then a lack of knowledge is usually the second one. Usually ego is a mask for something that they just don't understand. People always avoid pain rather than pursuing pleasure. You ever notice that? The greatest change is when somebody tells you, "Oh, you're going to die. You got to get in shape," right? It's like, "Oh, okay, now I'll go to the gym, right? I'll stop eating bad." It's versus well, I actually just want a toned body. I want to be able to have more energy, right? We avoid pain rather than chase pleasure. And what I have to do is I have to actually oftentimes go to the leader, and I have to show the pain that they're creating in themselves and in others, use that as a leverage point to get them to overcome ego and choose a path of knowledge, a better path, right? And if I can get them to buy into that concept, sky's the limit, right? And we have these hard conversations all the time. My staff and the companies I bought, they know if I say this phrase to them, they're probably in trouble. And I'll say, "Can I have permission to be honest with you?" That's when the hammer is going to be dropped, right? And but that's what it is. I have to remove ego so that we can actually get to the root problem. Then it's typically knowledge. Most of these people have just never been taught how to lead properly, right? They've just never been, and so that's the foundation of it. Then there's 7 or 8 leadership issues that they all deal with. They don't want to change. They don't value education because education scares them. I do a whole chapter on Alexander the Great. I think super fascinating. And his absence of fear, right? Getting a leader to pursue something rather than run from something. There's 2 great emotions in the human being, right? There's fear and there's love. Love is pursuing something. Fear is avoiding something. I can't say how many times I've broken down a page and I said, "Let's talk about your daily activity. Let's talk about what this looks like." And I'll put fear at the side and I'll put love at the other. And I'll say, what things are you pursuing and what things are you running from? We're getting rid of all these things you're running from, and we're going to start actively pushing you towards pursuing something, right? It's these basic things that just nobody has ever taught us. No one's ever, and it's just, there's so much there. I could go on for hours, but.
With this, what you're doing with the predictive index, with your Navy SEALs, is you're looking at the people, right? You said the number one thing to change a business, to increase the EBITDA, the value, the multiplier, is to start looking at the people. So you're looking at the individual person, you're finding out how they're wired, what motivates them, how to help them improve education and training, such like that,
right.
Like pouring into these people, right? In your experience, especially hiring Betty to be your cousin Betty or this and that, there's times where you have to make a tough decision about the people you've poured your life into. or they've done something to offend you. How do you deal with that as a leader, someone who you love, maybe even a family member who's burnt, or someone that you have to say, hey, I love you, but you gotta go because we're taking this next level. What's some advice you have there?
Yeah, that's the hardest thing in business, right? Especially in small business. And we deal with family, as I buy small businesses all the time, we deal with family issues. One rule of thumb I have that prevents me from getting into that boat is I have this rule where I say I never hire family. I just refuse to hire family. Now, you say you really don't hire any family. Well, yeah, I actually hire family, but when they step in my doors, they're no longer family, right? So like I have 3 boys. My oldest son worked for a production media company I had out of Atlanta, and he asked me, he was 15, 16 years old. He's like, Dad, I really want to learn this stuff. Could I just intern? I'll just go work. And I said, no, I don't hire family. He's like, really? Come on. And I go, no, I mean, I'll hire you as a worker, but I refuse to hire you as my son. Like there are these clear delineations from the start. I own the coffee company. My 17-year-old was a barista at the coffee company. And we had a conversation before we hired him. I said, look, here's the deal. Doug, who runs the coffee company, I was like, Titus is going to apply, and he's not my son when he applies. When he fills it out, he's never, ever, ever my son, right? Like he is Titus, the 17-year-old that needs to be trained and needs to be treated like everyone else. And I refuse to treat him as my son, right? Like I have to distance the personal relationship in business, because when business becomes personal, right, it clouds our vision, it clouds our judgment. Think about this. All of you guys, if you have 1 employee, 2 employees, 5 employees, is it worth sacrificing the whole business and your employees and all of its potential for one person? And the answer is never yes, right? It's like, no, of course not. But we all do it. I mean, like, I have to set up safeguards in my own business that if somebody doesn't perform, if they're not willing to grow, they have to go, right? Like, there is no choice.
So we're going to do Christine, and then Chris has another question. So up here, Christine's like a sister to me. She's a business coach.
Yeah.
She's fantastic. Her and her husband are
Awesome.
really awesome. So Christine.
Hi, Christine Goebel, the company suite. So you had talked about the three areas you consider when you're getting ready to purchase. So I was curious if we could knock those 3 things out, what actually caught your attention in the first place before you even find out if you could check those 3 boxes?
Well, in the first place,
You repeat on the 3 more.
yeah. So she's talking about my EBITDA, or my bottom line dollars, the net. She's talking about, then the second one would be the IP, right? Like the proprietary thing that you do. And then thirdly, it would be the operating system. Those are my opportunities to find I'm finding opportunity with those 3 things, right? What attracts me to business is always the people. And oftentimes I won't even look at a business if I don't believe in the people that are in that business. So I'm attracted to the people first, because business is easy, people are hard, And so if you can kind of shortcut the process to get to good people, then the business usually comes fairly easy. And so I'm usually attracted to people, right? Like I look at Anna and I watch her up here and I think, okay, that there's something there that you all just feel like, okay, there's something here, right? I'm always attracted to people first, but I have such a process right now, and just being fully transparent, we look at 10 deals a week right now, and we have a buy box, and in that buy box, so I've gotten a little more systematic in my journey today and what I buy and what I look at, and usually I'm going after though things that are vertically specific to data I have. What I want to do is control the environment of my outcome. So I have communities. I own a PitCon, 3 million fitness enthusiasts. I own a company called Think Realty. It's about 1 million real estate investors that touch that platform. I own the American Association of Private Lenders. It's a for-profit association for the highest net worths in the world, 1,800 very high net worth individuals. I have Money Is, which is a community of people trying to learn to invest. Close to 1,000 people in that. I have all these communities. And so what I'm doing is I'm constantly building and sourcing in that community what they need. So I do enough data science in those communities to determine this is what's missing. So why did I buy a nootropic supplement company? Because 3 million fitness enthusiast said it's really hard to source a clean, nootropic supplement that has non-stimulants and stuff like that. And we started searching, right? And so like my first look is like, how do I serve the data I already have? Because then I'm controlling my outcome, right? Like I already know I have 3 million buyers. And so I start there, I look at the people, and then I'm really just genuinely interested in just about anything. So then I'm kind of this wanderer, right? Like I've got wanderlust. I want to know what else I can buy that I've never bought before, and so I'm a little bit of a deal junkie there.
Okay, great.
Very cool. Chris Marshall has a question. Thank you, Christine.
So as startups in the early stages, a lot of our first hires need to be leaders as well. So as a leader who's looking to hire leaders or find leaders to work with them, can you give us any advice on finding leaders? And then how do you incentivize or figure out how to incentivize them, especially in the early days when a reliable paycheck isn't viable?
Yeah, it's a hard question, right? Like how do I attract good talent and give them enough of a carrot that they're willing to take the ride with me? First of all, I would say never rehire yourself. The first mistake every entrepreneur makes is they get enamored with their own abilities. Oh, I could build something. I could sell something. I'm going to go hire somebody that looks just like me, right? And we see it over and over in a business. It's like we get enamored with our own abilities, so we just go replicate our own abilities in our first hire. I always say you should hire the exact opposite of you, right? Like you should build the counterbalance. Good businesses have balance. And so if you're the creative, find somebody who can build structure and operations. If you're structure and operations, get somebody who's highly creative. I love counterbalancing it in the early phases to create sustainable, tangible growth. Then in that, how do I incentivize them? Your vision has to be so apparent that their vision fits inside of it. Even though I'm highly operational, I have massive vision. I want to change the world. Everything I do, it's about changing the world. It's like I want to start a nonprofit that we did in the US. We have a nonprofit that's in 108 countries. Right? Like I want to do things that like have crazy impact. And what that does is if you can share that vision, you will attract people. And people want the emotional paycheck of being involved in something greater than themselves. If your startup is like, well, I got this really cool idea, take the cool idea and exponentially increase it to the impact it could create in the world, in the community, for other people attached to that. And oftentimes I will have people double down on my vision. Norm is one of our young guys in the office, and we've got some rock star people. We have Navy SEALs to work for us, former NFL players. My assistant is the captain of the Jaguars cheerleader team. Like we hire amazing talent that are she has a PhD, she is a cheerleader, and she's my personal executive assistant. It's like, where do you but what it is, people walk in our office every day and they go, where do you find all these people? How do you get an NFL player to work for you? How do you get, these people that really don't have to work for you to work for you? It's 100% vision. They see a greater component that's bigger than what they're doing, and they want the emotional paycheck of taking the ride,
Visionary. So in the EOS model, you have the visionary and integrator. What are some of the challenges of being a visionary? Right, I'm a visionary, and from my vantage point, my team will tell you this. Get back, the struggle of trying to get a visionary to focus or to create the systems, the processes, all these things. It's like pulling teeth. So when it comes to self-leadership, knowing your strengths, what advice you have, for us working in that visionary space? And then Chris, he has a question up front. So right after he answers this.
And then Eli in the back. Over there.
Yeah. So, Gino Wickman gave us this concept that everybody's a visionary or an integrator. I agree to a degree. Gino and I are friends, right? So this is not me like taking a shot at Gino. We've actually ate dinner, discussed this whole thing. I think that visionaries, there's different types of visionary. I have my business partner, Andrew, is literally the craziest human being on the planet. Would you testify to that? He's got to be one of the craziest human beings on the planet. Untethered, dreamer. They'll often say when they announce this from stage, like Andrew's the dreamer and Eddie's the dream maker, right? Like Eddie makes this come to life. However, I have massive vision too. So to like put me in a box of like he's the integrator, wouldn't make sense either, right? I actually am a visionary, but I'm more of an operational visionary. So I think there's variations of vision. And it's like, and then there are people that really just love integration. I have my COO who became president, Nick Ham. Nick he doesn't care about vision. He wants to plug in and he will make it work. I mean, it's ridiculous how much Katie on the team, she's an amazing operator, integrator. My CFO, integrator, no vision, right? So what you have to do is you have to make sure that you counterbalance to the degree, the level of vision. And I always say, like, there's kind of like a level 5 vision, level 6 vision, level 10 vision. Andrew's a level 10 vision. And what I will tell you is I have to put somebody just as competent at making his goals and visions come to life. I have to have a level 10 integrator or operator to pair with him. Sometimes, so here's the crazy part. I have one executive assistant. My life runs fluidly. I run 9 calendars. I still, on average, work about 65 to 68 hours a week. It's intention. I love work. I'm passionate about it, right? Like, that's not work to me. I love it. Travel, speak. I'll speak 4 times this week on stages from 3,000 people to 30 people, right? Like, I love it, but my life is very systematic. Andrew has 4 personal assistants.
Probably more at this point.
Yeah, maybe 4 or 5. Andrew has an executive assistant, a personal assistant, a travel assistant, because in the end, I have to get out of him what he's capable of. He's brilliant in his area. But if I don't structure in a way to get it all out of him, it's just pie in the sky. It's we're blowing smoke. It's great ideas, but nothing ever comes to life. And so I found a way to create value by crafting. Like, so again, you have to counterbalance it. Now, here's how you solve the issue you're talking about. When visionaries don't like to be bridled, right? Andrew hates it, right? So what we do is we constantly have this trade-off. What you really want is an hour worth of like crazy whiteboarding and brainstorming and telling me all your ideas, right? So Andrew tries to give me road trips all the time where he can pitch me. Last week it was, I think we should buy all the land next to Buc-ee's. And I'm gonna build the world's smallest gas station called Ducky's. And it's gonna have an old guy with a pet duck and 1 gas pump, and it's gonna be an Instagram phenomenon. But that was his idea, and he's selling me on it, like wanting me to build pro formas and financial models. Like, no, this is a horrible idea. Like just leave it alone. Then he went to, well, how about Truckies? What if we did truck stops called Truckies? I'm like, no, I'm out. Like, let Buc-ee's have their space, But in the end, what I have to do is I have to say to him, I'll give you that space if you're willing to give me money. You don't have to do it, but you have to give us our space too, right? And so I'll force him into meetings he really doesn't want to sit in for the chance to have the meeting he really wants, right? There has to be symbiosis, right? Like, he has to be able to have the time to dream and pitch and get excited, and I have to have the time to make sure it all comes to life. And it has to be equality. We have that conversation all the time. Look, you've had your time. Now you're going to come sit in this office over here, and we're going to make sure that we make it all come to life, right? And
Talk about process.
yeah, we're going to build processes. And the thing is the entire time I got him sitting in process, I'm like, no, tell me what you really want. Okay, and we got a team, and we're pulling it out of him. And we're always like, no, we'll get back to the fun stuff, but just stay with us, bear with us, right? And so it's just this trade-off that in order for him. And then once you see it come to life, the payoff happens. You're like, oh, I can make myself do this for an hour if I get to go back and do what I really love for an hour,
Yeah, awesome. What's your name and what's your background?
Xavier with Citrus Mortgage. You mentioned some of the influence your dad had on you in business. Yeah. Did you have any other mentors? And if so, how did you connect?
So it's funny. My grandfather was a banker in our town, and my other grandfather was a sheriff in a town. I grew up in a town like Ocala, right? Like, I mean, you kind of knew everybody in town in Northeast Ohio. Grandpa was a sheriff. Other grandpa was a banker. And both of those men had huge influence on my life. But my dad, watching him struggle through the entrepreneurial journey and be honest and authentic about it, was the most impactful. The last person that really made an impact on my life was a guy by the name of Mark Vermeer. Mark ran big radio station groups. He also ran, if you're familiar with the House of Blues, he was the CEO of the House of Blues for years. And Mark used to say things like that. We'd go eat lunch, and I would always find somebody just a step ahead of me, and I'd say, "Can I just buy you lunch? I always was just working people to just to get information from." And Mark was the one who said, when I was in radio and television, he said, what do you want to do with your life? I said, I want to be you. He was like, okay, so what does that mean to you? And I said, I don't know. I just want to take the next step in leadership. And he was like, stop looking at a human and trying to decide if I want to be them. He was like, start looking internally. He's like, I think you need to have internal dialogue with yourself and determine what is the best you. The best you is not Mark Veneer. The best you is whatever, if you're a person of faith, he was like, the best you is whatever God created you to be, right? And so like he was very instrumental in like getting me to stop looking at in my 20s at every other successful person just trying to replicate what they were doing, and literally start internalizing and going, what was I created for? Like what's my greatest use? Because I always felt like a maverick. I felt like I didn't fit in any box, and so I just was off doing my thing, and then I was trying to like always mold into something else.
Eli in the back.
Elijah, how you doing?
Good.
I just want to know, like, if I give you my resume, will you look at it?
Yeah.
Hired.
We're always hiring.
All right. That's all I wanted to know.
I will let you know, and this is what I have. This is where the may I have permission to be honest with you comes in. We also fired. I shaved $400,000 off of our budget last week. In the end, people that want to be hired by our organization comes with a serious expectation. And the expectation is that, and I'm explaining this to you because I want everybody to hear it, right? The expectation is when I look at your resume, I say, yeah, there's something here, and we shake hands. I've never not done my part, which is pay people. I've never missed a paycheck, 8,000 people. I've never been not on time with a person's paycheck. Even when it came out of my own pocket, I've never missed mine. So what I say is when we shake hands, is I say, now the expectation is that whatever you said you were capable of doing, I don't ask for 40 hours. I ask for whatever you're capable of. Our organization is not a 40-hour organization. Our organization is I'll pay you what you're worth. I'll let you win with me, but you also will give me everything you've got. And when you don't, we're going to have to part ways because I will never not do my job. And so just like I do that with every single person because I've got to get to a place where I need high performers. I believe you probably are. So I give everybody the benefit of the doubt, but I have that very hard conversation in the beginning to make sure I set the standard and tone so that when we cut $400,000 off our staff. We had a whole conversation on the way here yesterday. One of them was his close friends and roommates, right? And in the end, it's like they know, like there is an expectation, right? So.
Yeah. So we have a question. Chris, again? I love how many questions.
And he keeps moving around like a different person. New person.
So someone who doesn't necessarily fit, I like Gino's perspective on the visionary integrator because it's easy to say, okay, I'm a visionary, I need to hire an integrator. But if you are someone in the middle, if you had to start over and hire one person, what would the opposite of you be?
I always say, depending on the type of business, if it's a product business, I am not predisposed to carrying a product all the way through. Even though I'm into the details, I don't care deeply enough about the details. So I want somebody that's good on the product side to make sure that the product we build is long lasting. On a service-based business, what I'm really predisposed to, if I was starting over and it was just me by myself in a room and I had a service that I was providing, I would hire an executive assistant that maximized my time. In the end, I'm always the most valuable employee, right? And if I'm not, then I probably shouldn't be in a leadership position. Now, in a tech-based business, I'm probably not the most valuable, right? But if it's in a service-based company, I'm just going to make sure I maximize my time first. What happens is there's the law of degradation. You'll get 110% out of me. I'll give you more than I would ever give if I didn't own the company, right? If I own the company, I'm always going to give more than anybody else. Then I hire somebody, they're not going to give as much as I do, and I shouldn't expect it. They're going to give probably 80% of their capability. I'm going to use Larry and everything else to get them to 85, 90%. You're going to continue to hire down, and there's going to be people in the organizations that are A, Bs, and Cs, and you got Cs that you're probably getting 60%. So what I have to do is not only hire for the person that complements me the most, but also look at the efficiency output of each person to know that if I can get more out of me for less, I'm probably going to hire an executive assistant first, right? The other person, I struggle to care about money. My dad beat it in my head so much about managing time that I manage my time. And I have lots of people around me. I haven't looked at a bank account. Oh, this is a bad thing to say. I haven't looked at a bank account in 4 or 5 years. Not even my own personal bank account. Like everything just kind of gets architected and taken care of. I know all the numbers, but like actually like logging into a bank account, like I see it, but I don't see the bank account. So because money does not motivate me, I'm not driven by money. I really could care less. It's not the scorecard for me. I have to typically hire somebody in finance really fast too for me.
When money isn't the main driver, and when you are the leader and you answer to no one, right? Like what keeps you going at age 44?
Yeah.
44, right?
44.
Yeah. So, and she just turned 21 today. Yeah, so happy birthday again.
Congrats.
When it comes to the drive, why are you still driving so hard 65 to 68 hours a week? Like what drives you so much? You got enough money.
Yeah.
You're good, you're set.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying earlier. It's like you got to get to something that's deeper. You know, when I sold all the companies in 2019, my wife, we talked about relationships in the back of the room. I'm horrible at relationships. I'm just gonna be honest with you, right? This is therapy, right? And I am. I'm great at business, and I'm horrible at relationships. And we've been married for 22 years. I have pushed at a level that probably isn't good, right? And my wife has watched me commute to Manhattan for 5 days a week for 2 years when I ran a tech company. She watched me commute to Kansas City 3 days a week when I was buying those companies. My wife has seen me zip all over the world for, the nonprofits for 22 years, right? Kids, I have 3 boys. And for me, what happened in my 30s was when I sold the second company, I really could just retire for life. And really got to a place where I actually struggled. I mean, I really went through a big period of just like depression and identity crisis. And really, I had to get back to a place where I realized that life was greater than the dollars I was chasing. The thing is the things you chase always elude you. If you're chasing money, it will elude you. You will never get to what you want. That just doesn't happen. If you chase something greater that the byproduct is money, then the money comes. There's this irony in what we chase. Oftentimes, if I chase the greatest relationship or the greatest, it's like they elude me. However, if I tie it to something greater, that the byproducts are the things that have value to me, I always have them. It's about changing the mentality. And what I did in my 30s was I realized money didn't matter and cars didn't matter and houses didn't matter. And, you say, well, yeah, but you had money at that point, right? It's like, but honestly, like I had money and I actually thought, what is life worth living? And I thought depressive thoughts of like, maybe I should take my own life. And I mean, it's like, you get in these weird holes, right? As like a creative, an entrepreneur. And yeah, I had more money than I knew what to do with in life. And I also thought about taking my own life. Like, think about how ironic that is. And I had to get to a place, a lot of soul searching. I grew up in a very faith-based house. I had no connection with my faith. That became a very big piece of that journey. And for me, it had to tie to purpose. I had to realize that my life had to exist for something greater than myself, and that was to impact other people. My nonprofit is called Impact Others for that very reason. We feed and educate malnourished and underprivileged children. We feed 4,000 a day. We have orphanages all around the world. We got 26 of them. We do clean water projects. We dug 9 wells in Ghana, West Africa last month. We start sustainable businesses. We just started a chicken farm in Guyana. We just started a taxi company in Ghana, West Africa. We started a woodworking plant in Laos. For me, that's what it's about. Like, it's the impact. And I constantly, I'll take a group to Guadalajara, Mexico in a week, and we get to go down and look at the sewing center we built, the feeding centers we have, and that's what it's all about. I love to pick up the orphans and realize and hold them and realize this person, this human on the planet, would never be able to have what they have today had I not put in the hours. Then it's like, then the money doesn't matter, the hours don't matter, the businesses don't matter, because it's like, you made some impact, some intrinsic, valuable impact on a human's life. That's it.
So as a leader, one of the important things is you have to lead yourself. And you have to have, at one point, you had to have a really tough conversation with it. Look in the mirror, I've got money in the bank account, I've hit all the levels of success, but there's got to be something deeper. And you have that tough conversation. There's got to be something else. if, you know, people will do more to avoid pain than gain pleasure, right? Like Charles Duhigg, Power Habits, he talks about this. But you had to have that conversation. So maybe us in the room aren't in that place where we're forced to face that pain. But what can we do? Like, what do you inspire us to take that leadership position now, to go deeper, to look at something more impactful, to expand our thoughts and our visions about who we can become?
My business partner, Andrew, we've had a lot of conversations. And Andrew, for a lot of his life, he chased money and relationships. And the funny thing is Andrew spent more money than any other human I've ever met on the planet. I've never seen somebody spend money like Andrew. He also, you know, it wouldn't bother him if I said this. He's super honest about it. He's also had 2 or 3 wives. He struggled. Just the thing he chased kept eluding him. And while he was also successful when we came together, you know, he had gotten to a place where he could probably retire too. We had a conversation about this. So it's like, just like I'm having a conversation about you or with you. And the thing is, I kept saying to him, yes, I went on this journey. I feel like I'm in a pretty decent place in understanding who I am and what I want and what's driving me. And we literally like talked about, what is it that you want? And, you know, he said, money. He wants, you know, things. You want like all these things. And I said, what if I told you that you had to do something else in order for all these things to happen? What would you do? What would that something else be? And we started talking about that. And what I said to him is like, there's something within your power that actually creates all of this coming to you. But if you start chasing this, it always will be, right? That's what I was saying. And what we architected was, if we created Collective Influence, the private equity firm, together, and we decided that we would give a large portion of that money all away. And I said, look, if you have the right motive in place and you're chasing the right things, all this stuff comes, right? And it's funny, you know, he's had more exits in the last 2 years, the 18 months with me, than he's ever had his entire life. And he probably has, I don't know if he probably has more capital. I don't know. I assume, I don't know what his net worth is, but I assume he's got more disposable capital today than he probably has had. You know, he's working really hard on a relationship. It keeps eluding him a little bit, but he's getting closer. And it's funny, she tied to what we were doing on the Impact Others side. Like, that was really like, she was like, wait a minute, like what are you doing? And she got super excited about that, and they connected over that. And so again, I think what I would recommend is like, take all these other things that you think you need and make them ancillary products, and decide and find something else that if you achieve that, all that stuff will come, right? And I'll say that helping someone else get to where they want to go is oftentimes the easiest way to get everything you want, you know?
A biblical principle of this, like if we were going to vitalize this thing, is seek first the kingdom of God, right? And these things will come to you, but it's like, seek first, what are you trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
And then the money will come. Help other people accomplish their dreams, their visions, their goals, and yours will come too.
Yeah.
But that's someone else first,
right?
Not
I grew up in a very faith-based home, and you know, no matter where you are in that journey, I don't, you know, have any thought toward where you should be. But for me, there are a bunch of biblical principles like that, like what I just said, like, and what scripture just connected to is the very basis of why I say it, right? Like, there's these principles, like, you know, and these principles are principles. So it doesn't matter like where your faith is or religiosity. It's like, there are universal principles, and there are a ton of them in scripture that they're just universal, right? Like, in seeking first something else, helping others, you know, it's like you get the byproduct of everything that's the outcome of it every single time.
Oh, man. You got a question?
Lori Dennis Insurance Solutions. So when you're looking at the 5 phases of growing your business, and you start at phase 1, startup.
Yeah.
And then you get to perseverance. You know, in the insurance industry, we start at startup,
Right.
and hopefully we're looking at succession.
Right.
Because in the insurance industry, the payoff is pretty decent.
Right.
But when you get, exactly, when you get to perseverance, what can you say to an entrepreneur who is at that stage,
Right.
pushing for the next stage,
Yeah.
looking to succession, looking to the final payoff?
Right. Perseverance. I always say the best way out of perseverance is creating the right processes. Oftentimes, perseverance isn't about gaining the next customer as much as it is understanding the value of your last customer. And if I could replicate that customer through process, then I can have the right customer in the future. Oftentimes in perseverance, what we do is we just hyper focus on, we got to get the next one, we got to get the next one, we got to sell the next policy. It's just this rat race we're in. But we need to take enough time that we look back at the last best customer and we build a process to make sure we get more of them. As I buy businesses, I don't think of it as transformation. What I think about it is in incremental growth. So I don't think, if I bought a business and all of you are the employees of the business, my thought isn't how do I revolutionize and get double? What I think is could I find enough efficiency in this room to get 10 to 20% more out of this business with this same group of people? That's very doable. There's in every single room, there's a lack of 20% of effort in every single room, right? So could I create that effort? Could I create that small win that creates growth? I also then look at my client base and I think, so when I buy a business, I actually, unless it's a startup, right? Like if you're a startup agency or something like that, and you're still just trying to get those first customers, but if you're in perseverance, you've got enough and you've got movement. What I always do is I always look back at the past and I say, which ones of these can I replicate and which ones would I want to replicate? And could I replicate 20% more of those, right? So it's very incremental. I don't think of it as like, how do I double this book of business? I say, how do I get 20% more out of this book? And they're the people I actually want. Then I began to architect process. What I get out of perseverance and into viability is always process, right? Processes do a couple of things. One, they allow us to replicate what we want. It also is like a big spotlight on everybody else that's taking away from the organization. The more I process what I do, the more I can look across all the people in the organization and go, who's actually following the process? Who's the most efficient at the process? Who's hindering me from the process happening, right? It's like a big spotlight on the people that fall, and it takes people typically, unless it's all tech, to follow through with those processes. And usually it provides the greatest light to see my high performance.
So we've got probably 5 more minutes. What I'd like to do is, if there's someone here who's willing to kind of talk about their specific business and what they're working on, and what we can do is as a community just kind of take a look at their business and maybe add 1 or 2 things that might help their business. Is there anybody that wants to do that specifically?
Do it.
All right, Christine. All right, so Christine.
I'm going to take the opportunity.
Yeah, do it.
I don't care.
So what we just experienced is someone taking an opportunity in the past to hand out a resume or to pitch to the group, taking an opportunity to talk about business. All your questions and such, like that's the mission and purpose. This is why we're doing this, because when's the last time you sat in a room with the guy who sold this many businesses with that many columns, right? So Christine, give us a high-level overview of your business and maybe the number 1 challenge you're facing, and then what we'll do is we'll hear his brain on how he would approach it.
Okay. So high-level overview, organizational health and development. We have created processes and a methodology to incorporate how to build systems and then also teach the whole interpersonal skills. So we're able to actually look at what's happening in the business, grow the people, and then build the efficiency.
Sure.
So all that's working great. We're seeing all the results. Growth has been, the first fiscal year was 15%, then it was 20, then it was 57 this last fiscal year. So I'm seeing it grow. The challenge that we have is, it's a couple of them. It's even just knowing how to talk about it without having to explain it. So that's one. The other thing is we get so entrenched in them that the amount of time it takes to walk them through that and grow them, it can take a couple months and then you're seeing it. It could take a couple years. And so just gaining the attention of the community, because we know in this community it's big, but we're remote, so we it hit a lot of areas. But even just attracting people, because I think my attention, it's hard for me to pull myself out of these other businesses and focus on my own from time to time. So
it's the consultant's dilemma, right? I can
Mhm.
fix everybody else's business, but then I got to run my own too, right? Couple pieces of advice. Number one, in a complex business, the owner struggles to tell the story. But if you have successes in a complex business, learn to let your customer tell the story, right? I guarantee you, like whatever you struggle to explain, if we went to your best customer, we said, hey, tell me what they did for your business. That whatever they say next is what your next customer needs to hear, right? Like your next customer, needs to hear what they say, not necessarily what you say. So what I've learned is especially in complex business models like business coaching, what do you do? Well, I do a million things, right? Like I build systems and processes, I fix interpersonal problems, I get people to work fluidly together, I get more performance. It's like you do a million things, but what they really need to hear is whatever your customer says. You get a bunch of your customers that have success to tell your story, right? And push that out through social media. One thing that we do is we'll oftentimes with like the Empire operating system, we the CEO of Arby's, Don, literally gave us this crazy testimony of like, Eddie helped me take Arby's 20% more or whatever. When somebody's considering getting on the Empire operating system, we just say, hey, as a brief explanation, we're just going to send this out to you. We literally just send this quick video out, and it's Don, the CEO of Arby's going, and people are like, okay, I need that in my business, right? It's like, so you get somebody with high credibility that tells the story succinctly, it's even better, right? So let someone else tell your story. And the more complex it is, it was like I was thinking about like our breakfast this morning. And you're like, you're trying to explain to me what he does, and then you're like, I don't even know. You tell him what you do, right? And it's like, and it'd be even better is if I actually talked to the last client he just left and said, what did he do for you, right? Whatever they say is probably what your next client needs to hear. So I would make sure you focus on that. Second of all, is in the end, business coaching is a simple model, and the sales process is also simple. So I owned a consulting firm a piece of a consulting firm up until last year. I grew them about 400%, and I sold out. I called Sharper Consulting out of Chicago. The way that I grew that business was I told Gary Harper, who was the founder, I said, we're going to get you on stages, and I just need you to solve people's problems real time, right? You have to find an environment to solve people's problems. So we got him into EO, we got him into Vistage, we got him into groups like this, we got him into literally, I told him, I said, I want you to, if you coach people for 30 hours a week, I want to find 10 hours a week where we put you in front of people and you solve problems. Because then they're going to immediately jump to this place where it's like, oh, I need her more in my life, right? And then have a systematic way of just taking them through a funnel, right? Like, this is what it looks like, this is what engagement looks like, and then just go to the numbers game, right? And if you can get in front of them, I told Gary, I said, if I can get you in front of 1,000 people every quarter, 1,000 business owners, I said, I bet you anything we could close somewhere between 30 and 50. Would that be great? He's like, actually 30 and 50 clients would be way too many. I said, okay, let's pare that back. We get you in front of 500 people, right? And we just played this numbers game with him. And then I literally just got him, and we paid to play on some of them, and he went into the masterminds, he went into these groups, and he would find ways into environments, because you have to possess enough authority that they'll listen to your solution and they'll take action on it, right? And if you're always you have to architect it from a position of strength, right? And when you need trust, you have to architect from a position of strength. If I get you on, if you were sitting here in this seat and you were answering all the questions, you would have all the strength, right? And so you have to architect that place where it provides that immediate action to the, like, oh, I need her in my life, I need her in my business. Yeah. Social can do that, not as well as in person, especially on business coaching.
Yeah, it worked really well, like up in C12.
Yep.
And so it was like the 11 came quickly.
Yep.
But then again, it's like, okay, well, that's a day a month. And so like I have to be really careful about.
The other thing too is I would be very careful in that I made Gary rotate groups, and he hated it because he's like, "Yeah, I have to sign up for a year." I'm like, "Okay, then you're only doing it for a year." And then he would get these renewals like, "Well, they need me to come back into the group for a year too." I'm like, "But does 80% of the group know what you did? Did they? Has 80% of them been presented with do business or not do business? Yes. Okay, then you're not allowed to go back to that group. You have to go to a new group." And he would be like, he's like, "But it feels really good, and I really need me." And
I
they,
love them all.
yeah, I love them all, and I have relationships. And I'm like, and they've already made the decision that about 80% of the group didn't love you enough to sign up. So let's move on. It's like, and it's business not about just building relationships, it's about building relationships that have a symbiotic win.
Yeah, super helpful.
Cool. All right, so
Guys, we're gonna wrap up today, but a round of applause for Eddie. Thank you for coming.
I'm happy, and I run my own social. If you go to Eddie Wilson Official on Instagram, Facebook, whatever, I will continue the conversation with you if you guys want to continue to have a conversation.
Yeah. So that's where you guys can connect with Eddie. Continue the conversation. It's at Eddie Wilson Official, right? He's also very active on LinkedIn. But guys, thank you so much for coming. What we're gonna do is probably 10 or so minutes where go say hi, give them your business card, give them your resume. Just say hi, and then I gotta steal them away for lunch. All right, guys. One more round of applause for Eddie, Cal CP, and for Chris for having me together.